Welcome everybody. It's my presentation, Scraps of Sustenance. Today I'm presenting about how the food choices we make on a day-to-day basis affect the planet and shape our future. So first, here's an overview of what I'm talking about today. First, we're going to start off with what food waste really is, in its essence. So what is it really about? Second, we'll touch on my personal significance with it. So why do I care about it? Third, we'll talk about does it really matter? What are the real implications of it? We'll move on to whom does it matter the most? Are people affected disproportionately by it? Then we'll talk about what food waste separation does. Does it work? How does it work? Then making it mandatory. How do you ensure compliance? Then we'll talk about applying it in a school setting, so like we are in right now, in a professional setting, and then what you can actually do on a personally, individual basis to make food waste go away. So we'll start off with what food waste really is. So it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but in essence, food waste is just food that goes underutilized or wasted, basically. So there are 4 stages of where it really occurs. So the first is farming. Let's say a farmer doesn't like the way a crop looks. He doesn't think it'll sell well. He'll just throw it out. Second is transportation or storage. Let's say a fridge malfunction. Same can be said for a supplier, like your grocery store, local grocery store. Fourth, in the household, and this was what really shocked me. So on individuals in the household waste 53%. So 53% of all of this comes from household waste, which is just mind-boggling. And it really shows it's an individual problem. It's not, we can blame corporations for all of this, but at its essence, it's an individual problem. And so some statistics to really put it into perspective, 2.33 billion people struggle with food insecurity. And when you consider that a third of all the foods, of all food on the planet is wasted, it really shows that instead of wasting so much food, we could really give it to some people who need it. And so in industrialized nations like G7, we waste 222 million tons of food per annum, whereas in countries in the entire sub-Saharan subcontinent, they only have about 230 million tons of food. So we're wasting nearly as much food as they have, which is just crazy to think about. So personal significance, why does it matter to me? First, it's the waste of a valuable resource, which is unfair to the 2.33 billion people in countries like Asia, Africa, South America, and the millions in developed nations who struggle with food security. And growing up in a Hindu family, I was really taught to empathize with others and think about others when making my decisions. Second, it increases landfills, which is another equity issue because, as I'll touch on in a later slide, landfills are disproportionately affecting poorer people and people of color. And third, detrimental environmental factors. So food waste releases methane, which I'll touch on the next slide actually, but methane is about 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide in trapping heat. So we'll touch on why that's so bad for the environment. So global importance, why does it matter to us here? So first, the climate impact. Methane is up 10% over the last 2 decades. And like I said, it's 28 times more powerful than CO2. In fact, in a 20-year span, methane will catch and trap 80 times more heat than CO2. So all we hear about CO2, we rarely hear about methane in this context. So second, it's a waste of resources, right? When you're wasting food, you're not just wasting that food, right? You got to think. You're wasting the water from irrigation, the energy and labor costs from farming and transport, and last but definitely not least, the fertile land, which is hard to come by. And then, as we talked about, world hunger and inequality. So in Asia, Africa, South America, and not even to mention the millions, in the U.S. here who struggle with food insecurity. They're all struggling while you're throwing away food. It's a little contradictory to hear. And then fourth, economic loss, right? Everyone's losing money in this situation. The farmer's losing from unsold crops. The grocery store or whomever the supplier is losing from unsold inventory. And you're losing from wasting food that you bought. So, what this shows is it's not really like an economic or a social or environmental issue alone. They're all in conjunction. So here, who does it matter to the most, right? We've learned about it affects us as a planet, but who's most impacted by it? So you have to think. The answer lies in location of these landfills. Okay, so landfills are almost always placed near underprivileged communities, right, and at-risk communities. In fact, over 54% of all landfills are placed in communities of predominantly people of color or low income. And actually 70% of all landfills are placed within 1 mile of public housing. And so you have to think, so what are the detriments of being near one of these landfills? And so there are a couple that come up. Of course, the odor, but then you get more serious, health risks, such as hazardous air pollutants and potential groundwater contamination, which can lead to health risks, quality of life risks, and in extreme cases can lead to death. And so this is ultimately an equity issue because of where they're placed. Food waste separation. So now that we've talked about what the problem is, how do we actually solve it? How do we go about solving it? So first, I'll run you through what it means. Food waste separation is basically a legally binding policy that makes companies and individuals compost their food correctly, right? And can impose this by fines. And so here are some use cases of where it's occurred. So in Japan, they started this about 25 years ago because, Japan's a relatively small country. They don't have the room for a bunch of landfills everywhere. So they implemented this, and in the last 25 years, now they're projected to have cut 60% of their food waste from 2000 to 2030. So by 2030, they're projected to have cut 60%, which is crazy. And what's more crazy is in South Korea, the results have been even more overwhelming. With now their food waste, 95% of it is going towards composting and other utilized areas, which is just crazy to think about on such a massive scale. And then third, even in the U.S., we've had some positive results in New York and California. And the success has been limited by the magnitude of what they're able to do, but still there, showing that the room is still open in the U.S. So making it mandatory. How do you ensure compliance among corporations, individuals? So I think there are three main things you want to go about doing. So first, acting mainly on corporations and institutions first, right? You target the big players who compost the most, produce these on massive volumes here. And it'll trickle down. So second, then you can apply punishment to individuals for, repeated offenses in a neighborhood or town. And then third, required staff education and compliance meetings within a company, right? I think that a lot of the problem stems from, people not being educated enough on these topics to understand the risks of, just throwing things away blindly. So now, let's talk about in a school setting. So priorities of implementing food waste in a school setting, like we're in right now, is real efforts to educate the faculty, staff, and student body. Like I mentioned, I think a lot of the problem stems from people not being educated on the topic. Second, I think punishment for repeated misplacement of food. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be honestly something like a 20-minute detention or education learning class afterwards. Third, I think open top composting bins. We're trying to get this happening at our school, actually, Belmont Hill, because in such a large environment, it's hard to fit everyone in to compost something. Fourth, timeliness after lunch for proper composting. If a kid is a couple minutes late to science class because they were composting food correctly, I think that's beneficial for all of us. And then fifth, I think that this is really important because I think that students strive on encouragement, encouragement for beneficial composting and improvement. I think that students do really well when they have encouragement. I think that's a very important one. So now, in a professional setting, there are three main things. So harsh and increasing financial punishment. I think that you can start off a little slower, right? But as companies continue to disobey this law, I think that you want to, keep punishing them accordingly. Second, I think required employee classes for composting education would be important. Like I said, education is the main theme here. And third, publish findings on major companies' policy compliance, right? I think that this would decentivize a lot of companies from just blindly ignoring protocol. So what you can actually do, a lot of this sounds good, right? We don't want food waste in this country, but what can you do on an individual basis? And to that I said, the main theme here is letting people know that your voice matters, you care, right? Sure, you can do some stuff, but I think the main thing is letting people know that your voice matters, sorry. So there are three things you can do. So posting on social media, I think just letting people know, getting your voice out there. Second, speaking by voting. Vote for a politician who supports the policies you like, who you think is actually going to make a difference. And third, joining an advocacy group. There are many good food waste groups, such as like Zero Food Waste Coalition Group. It's a good one. You can join many of these, and they're obviously, as the name suggests, going to advocate for your policy and such. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.